Tonight I'm going to talk about dividers, and I'm not talking about a calculator. I'm talking about these. This is a set of dividers. Now, this is a relatively inexpensive set. I think these may be Brown and Sharp. Let's see, yep, Brown and Sharp. Just regular spring dividers. Now you may have a set of firm joint dividers like this with an ear or a wing on them, and you can order these. These are called wing dividers. Now you're not going to find a set like this. This is made by a company called Ben-Hur. They're quite old, and these are my favorite ones because they have a little micro adjust here so that I can really get an accurate reading. And when I went to school to be a machinist, our instructors had us make these, and they had to fit perfectly onto a plate that had some little pegs that fit right into these holes. And you had to lay them out on a piece of steel with a set of dividers, and you scribed a circle and then marked your end. You just did that, lined it up, and marked your end. So you just made a crosshair, and then you walked all the way around to meet a specific blueprint. Now, dividers are not limited to the metal shop. I use them frequently in the wood shop to divide lines. Now, if I have a piece of wood and it's of a length that is, easy to divide. Let's see what, I don't know how long this is. This is 9. That looks like a little under a 16th, which actually I can get pretty damn accurate if I want. I'm going to say that's about 9 1. So let's double check that. 9. It is shy, actually. It's almost 9 1/32. It might be a little less than that. Anyways, so it's of a dividable length, but it's slightly odd. Now I can measure an inch from the end, and then an inch from the end. And I'm working over the camera here, so I do apologize. Alright, and then I just draw a straight line between the two. And I could put on my square head, but I'm just laying this out for a quickie demonstration here, no big deal. Alright. And this actually increases the variables. So now what I've got here is a line that I need to divide. And I know that it's 9, so I could divide it a certain amount. I could divide it by 9, and that would be, theoretically, every inch would be a line. So we take our rule and we lay the point just inside of that little tick mark there, and then you would set it one way or the other so that it's pretty damn close. Alright, and then we just put it on there and walk it across. So that's 4, because you got to count that one. 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it would be 9. But if you look, I'm almost an 1/8 inch over there. So I take my little micro adjust here and I decrease just a little bit, and I continue, and I go back and I can re-walk that line. Oops. And when you do that, guess what you got to do? You got to go start over. The benefit of doing it this way is that you can have a divided piece. Say I wanted to cut this into this many pieces. There we go. That's about perfect. Okay, so now it's no longer an inch. even though theoretically it should be an inch or slightly above. It's just, it won't fall into the tick mark anymore. So the benefit of this is that I can get a more precise reading, and you can see my original mark right there and the final mark right there. So that's the original at exactly 1 inch, and that is the new one slightly off. And I would say, oh, that's I have no idea what that is. I could measure it if I wanted to. Let's see here. That's I want to say that's a 16th. So it's about a 16th of an inch. So a 16th of an inch, give or take, off. So the benefit of this is that whenever you divide something like this, if it was a much smaller distance, say a ½ inch or so, so like this, say I wanted it to be that far apart, I could get closer and have them more uniform all the way across. Now this is a benefit not just in a metal shop, not just in a wood shop. This is a benefit when you're doing upholstery, think laying out tacks. This is a benefit when you're drilling holes because they look much more uniform. Or say that you had a piece of steel that you were using as an end plate for something, and you needed to lay out a certain amount of holes specifically to match a pre-drilled surface that you could not lay across to mark the holes. Well, you can use your dividers to lay that out. Say I wanted to lay it out this distance here, okay? And on this piece of material, I just couldn't match that. Well, what you can do is set it to where your dividers are at the very edges, like that. And you can go over and drill your hole right at the edge there. So you know, so say if your drill bit is a 1/4 of an inch, you know that you'd have to set it an 1/8 inch further. So you'd have to set it approximately. And I'm doing this through the camera, so I do apologize. So you'd have to set it to about right there. So you could drill your first hole, and then from the edge, measure to the center. And then once you mark that center, then you could just mark it, and then walk it around that circle that you scribe, and you could drill your holes. The benefit of that is that it gives you more flexibility. Just because you can measure from here to here doesn't mean you're going to get it right, because when I measure, the measurement would be different. It would be very difficult to mark this out if I didn't already have it. So I could measure that and then try to mark it from there. But if your ruler is off, you know, then you're going to run into some pretty serious problems. And unless you spend a lot of money on a rule, like this is a Brown and Sharpe. So unless you spend a lot of money on a rule to get a good rule, it could be off, and that discrepancy is going to be in your part. And when you're drilling bolt holes like this, bolt circles is what this is called. When you're drilling bolt circles, they have to be pretty precise, because if you rotate it and you try to put it on this way, if the holes are not drilled perfect, they're not going to fit. And as you can see, since there's 6 holes in the center, if you rotate it 90 degrees, it wouldn't fit anyways. So your dividers are a very useful tool, and if you do not have a set, then you should get a set. And a compass, by the way, is not quite the same thing. It will accomplish the same task if you have a surface that is easily marked on, like wood or paper. But your dividers will be much more versatile tool. So that's how you lay them out. And I'll be honest with you, I thought it would take me a little bit longer to do that line, but if you use them a lot, you get pretty used to them. So if you're going to buy a set, you want a pretty nice set, you want to, I'm going to advise for a set called wing dividers, and that's this piece here is a wing, and they're much more accurate. If you look at these are nice dividers. There's nothing wrong with them, but when I put them down, they bend. So if I'm trying to scribe a circle, and I don't know if you can see it bending, but if I'm trying to scribe a circle, it's going to fall into wood grain, and that circle's not going to be perfect. See, it's actually more almost an oval. Whereas if I take this set and I scribe that circle, I can push down a lot harder, and I'm going to get a much more accurate circle. So that's it. There's your dividers. When you're laying out a mark, you should either use a knife or a device called an awl. And this is an awl. And the benefit of that is that whenever you lay out your mark, you actually put a little divot down, especially in wood, paper, and thin metals. And that divot, when you go to drill your hole, your drill bit's just going to fall right in there. It's a very big benefit when you've got a lot of accurate holes to drill. And if we think back to when I was making this box here, laying out all these holes, I used a set of dividers to do this. Now, it's not perfect. There's a few that are off a little bit, but it's because when I hammered them, the head of the rivet went one way or the other. That's a kind of a drawback of using soft rivets like copper. But if I didn't use a set of dividers, I would not have got such nice uniform rows. And you can see some of the bent heads as you look down, but they look pretty good. And here's another benefit of using your dividers. See, I've had this fan here, I had this grill, and I could have just laid the grill up there, but what I did is before I cut this hole, that punched mark, I found the center of each ear, and I just scribed a small circle around. You can see some of my layout die left from wiping it off. Scribed a line across, and then laid them out so I could find them exactly. And when the result of that was a grill that doesn't touch the metal case. You can just hear it tap when I push down on it. And the benefit of that is when this fan runs, it doesn't vibrate. It doesn't make a whole lot of noise. And that was pretty important to me because this machine's probably going to be pretty loud as it is. By the way, here's the update for those of you interested. I'm also using a set of dividers to lay out a series of marks around the circumference of this piece here, because in the end, this lid, because that's what it is, will be actually screwed to this plate here to prevent it from flexing around these corners here, because I can work my nail under there and actually move it in and out, and that's not good, especially when there's 2 pounds of coffee pushing at it this way. This is not the trier hole, by the way. This is the hole for filling it up and emptying it. The trier hole will be right here, and it'll probably only be about a ½ inch. I don't think it has to be that big. But that's it. Get you a pair of dividers and use them every day. You'll be surprised how often they come in handy. For instance, finding the center of this without a tape measure. I just put my one leg there and one leg about where I thought the center was, and just flopped it back and forth until I found the center. Found the center, marked a line, and that was good to go. And the benefit of that is that I got my layout exactly where I wanted it to be, with no regard to which from a corner or a side. So if there is any discrepancy on the sides, I don't have to worry about that transferring into my work here. And when I put the holes in there for the bits, they'll just slide right in and they'll look uniform. So that's it. If you don't have a set of dividers in your toolbox, you should really have some. It doesn't matter if you rely a lot on power tools. It doesn't matter if you do a lot of handwork. Your dividers are going to save your hide a lot. I could even use my dividers to find the center of this edge. So if I was making a mortise, or if I was making a tenon, I could find out exactly where I wanted those lines to be using my dividers. So if you get a cheap set, that's fine. Just bear in mind that they will flex. And with dividers, you really get it's a piece of metal. You know, you can make do with a cheap set for a very long time. But if you can swing it, get you a nice set. Even if you get them out of the $5 bin at the flea market, get you a good set. They'll last, evidently they'll last forever, as long as you take care of them. To sharpen the ends, I just use a piece of sandpaper. And this is not sandpaper, but I'm going to demonstrate anyways. And just take them and slide them back and forth like this. Because now these ones are actually rounded, because I can use these for wide circles, but these ones are not. So you just take a piece of sandpaper and you just flop it back and forth while sliding it until you get a nice uniform edge. And you want both sides to be pretty close to being straight across. And that's it. Have a good night.